So what I'm going to try to do is to talk to you about, as he said, not just the whole cost side of the equation. It's really about, in our case, so we had David here earlier who was talking about the supplier side. I'm going to be talking about what I call the other side, and that's the delivery side, the connection to our customers and our consumers. And so what I'm going to fundamentally talk about is how do we deal in today's environment when there is such a constrained transportation market? So what technologies and strategies are we using to leverage that? But before I get started, I thought what I should do is at least talk a little bit about who is Land OLakes. Because I think when I say Land OLakes, different people have different perceptions of who we are, what we do. Because when I say Land OLakes, most people say butter, right? So who says, when I say Land OLakes, who thinks butter? Right, you probably don't think anything else, right? And in reality, butter upon itself is only one portion of our organization. We're about a $15 billion company. That dairy segment, which is on the left-hand side, is about a third of that, maybe even a little less. And of that third, butter may be half. When you make a pound of butter, you make 2 pounds of powder. So we make non-fat dry milk, basically, which goes into things like milk chocolate, infant formula, chocolate milk, right? So you can see here that dairy is only a portion of that business. We also make cheese, but when you make cheese, you make whey. Once again, whey is a byproduct, goes into protein. Then we have our Purina animal nutrition business. So we do farm animal feed. Pigs, cows, chickens, horses, those kind of feed. We also do zoo feed. 70% of the zoos in the United States feed our product. It's called Missouri. Okay? So you can see that now we have these two businesses, our dairy business, our feed business, and then we have an ag business, seeds, and crop protection. And then our last business is one that we recently started, is our sustain business. And it's all about what does sustainability really mean in this ecosystem, and how do we talk about sustainability? And from our purview, it says it's all about how do you go and say what's the least amount of inputs for the outputs that you need? The least amount of inputs for the outputs you need. And we think we have a unique view of this thing because if you really think about the food ecosystem, we're one of the few companies that starts with, we help farmers with seeds, we give them crop protection, we help feed their animals, we get milk from them, it goes all the way down, and then we finally make a branded product called Land OLakes butter, which is what everybody knows us for. But we actually do all this other stuff at the same time. So who are we? Just in summary, just so we can quickly move on, who are we? We're the third largest member cooperative in the United States. So we're about a $15 billion company, Fortune 225. We're about 800 member cooperatives, so we're a cooperative is what we are. So we're not a typical public company. We have about 3,500 members as part of this cooperative, 290 facilities in the US, about 10 overseas, 10,000 employees. But the left-hand side is probably the most important stuff, right? We serve over 300,000 agricultural producers in the United States. 25% of every farmer in the United States uses our product. 13 billion pounds of milk. We're the third largest provider of milk in the United States. 100 million animals. 100 million animals are fed every day, not every week, every day, by our products. And 50% of all the acres, so it's 25% of the farmers, but it's 50% of all the acres in the United States use our products. So you can see we are much more than what, how many people raised their hand when they said butter? Raise your hand again, all the people that said butter. I hope, if nothing else, you realize we're not just this butter company. We're significantly bigger than that. And we have one purpose, and one purpose only. Our purpose is to feed human progress. If you think about the population of the world and what's going on, this whole idea of more outputs for less inputs becomes extremely important because of the growth of population. So that's a little about who we are. So I'm going to talk to you about the challenge we have in the current transportation market, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of the strategies using technology we're using to deal with those challenges. So anybody in here who's either a shipper, receives product, a manufacturer, doesn't matter, knows that there's a huge demand for trucking. Can't get enough. I got somebody shaking their head like, you can't get enough, can you? Right? You just can't. None of us can. And why is that? Well, there's numerous reasons. So let's start with the macroeconomic reasons why. The macroeconomic reasons, unemployment rates are down. Right? Everybody knows that. What happens when unemployment rates go down? People start feeling good, right? So then you get this positive consumer outlook. So unemployment rates are down, positive consumer outlook, and when people have positive consumer outlook, what do? They go buy stuff, right? We all do, right? We all go buy stuff. So more and more people are buying more and more stuff. It doesn't matter what the stuff is, they're just buying all kinds of stuff. And what does that do? That means we have this ongoing increase in the demand for trucking. So that's the macroeconomics. Then we have a driver shortage issue. And I say that driver shortage issue is partly put upon us, but we've created part of this ourselves. As an industry, we've created this. As supply chain professionals, we've created the problem. So on the one hand, you've got ELD. Everybody knows what ELD is. It's the mandate. They all got a log. That's taking some drivers out of the system. Let's be realistic. Some drivers are saying, I don't want to be watched. I can't afford it. Whatever the case may be, they're gone. And there's various estimates as to what percentage, but there are some that are gone because of that. The next one is fundamental demographics. The fundamental demographics is the population is aging, right? So with past generations, we used to have somewhere around 10% of the driver population who was either near or at retirement age at any given point in time. Today, it's 25%. So 25% of the drivers are going to start leaving. So we think we have a driver problem now. It's just going to get worse. So that's something that we have no control over. It's kind of demographics. But the last one I want to talk about is something we've done. And we all have control over this. And it's this whole cost question. We have forced our carriers, right, to drive their prices down. We've been asking for it for forever, basically, right? Lower the cost, lower the cost. Well, carriers only have a few ways that they control cost. Fuel's one of the big ones that they have, but they can't control that. So what can they control? Driver wages. And so what have they done? They haven't necessarily given the drivers the increase that they should. And so if you're a driver, you're going to say, well, I can find a better job doing something else, and I can be home every night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they leave the industry. So we've caused that. We've caused that because we've said lower cost. And so what we've done, so all of us in this room who have to get carriers, all of us can't get enough because we've kind of done it to ourselves. And not any one individual company, but as an industry, we've done this to ourselves is what we've done. And what does that do? That puts pressure on capacity. The one thing that we all need, if we're going to sell stuff, if we're going to make stuff and get it to the next place, we need capacity. And FTR says that we're at a point where we're at 100%. 96 is kind of where we should be, and we're at 100. And that's why a lot of people in this room who try to get capacity know that it's just not available. Just not available. And then the last thing that's going on, so you got those macroeconomics going on, you got the driver shortage going on, right? Capacity, less of it. The last thing that's going on is that consumers want a different experience. And the way I describe it is, what's happening to us today is that what goes on in your 5 to 9 is bleeding over to your 9 to 5. Right? I got a couple people shaking their heads. They know exactly what I'm talking about. So what goes on when you go home? So in other words, when you order stuff when you're at home, when you shop when you're at home, you expect now that same kind of service, choices, and everything else with your suppliers. So the habits that you have in the 5 to 9 have bled over to the 9 to 5. And those things are like, and David talked about, more choices. Your customers want more choices on how products get shipped to them, because that's what they get. That's what you get when you're at home. You want visibility at work now. You want to be able to track that shipment from the day it leaves to the day it shows up, or the hour it shows up in reality, right? Because you get that at home. Right? You can track almost anything. And then they want reliability, because when you order something online, as a general rule, except for Sarah's one incident or Danielle's incident where she didn't get her product in time, but generally, when they say it's going to take 3 days, it takes 3 days. It takes 2 days, it takes 2 days. And your business customers want the exact same thing. So you have all these things going on, and we do too. So it's happening to us as well. And in our business, it's compounded by our 3 different business models. So the bottom left-hand side is our Purina animal nutrition business. Shipments are fairly flat. You can see that. They don't vary much. That one should be pretty easy for us to get carriage for. The problem is 40% of that business is same day or next day. So if you think about that, so if it was flat like it was and we could predict it better, we could probably have an easier time getting carriage. 40% of it's same day, next day in our Purina business. Our dairy business, huge peaks, as you can imagine, right? It's the butter season. It's basically the holidays. That's when people bake. It's when they buy a lot of butter. 40% of our butter is sold basically in the November, December timeframe. Actually, it's a 4-week period. So we have huge peaks, which we can kind of predict. The problem is it's refrigerated. Trying to get a refrigerated truck during the holiday season is not the easiest thing. Okay? And the last one is our Winfield business. That's our crop protection business, our seed business. And you can see the huge peaks. Why the huge peaks? Think about it. If you're from the United States, 4 weeks ago, as a general rule, it was kind of cold in the United States. Hadn't heated up yet. All of a sudden, it got warm. Every farmer on the planet, or at least in the United States, wanted to plant. And they don't want to plant tomorrow. They want to plant today. And so we get a call from all those farmers, all that 50% of the acres served. You get a call from them instantaneously saying, send me seed. So in this business, our problem is 80% of it is same day, next day. Same thing happens for like a fungicide. So it's rainy, it's wet outside, and all of a sudden their plants get fungus. They need the fungicide. They don't want it tomorrow generally. They don't want it a week from now. They got to have it today. So you can see the transportation issues this causes for us. Right, so and I'm sure that every company here has its uniqueness on why they have those issues. So how do we solve this problem? Right? How do we, as an industry, solve this kind of issue? We think, and we're working on these, there's only one way. We all together got ourselves into this. Not each individual companies. We all did this together. Right? Some of it, like I said, was put upon us. Some of it we created. But we're all in this together. So we believe the only way to do this is to develop partnerships and use all the available technology to do one thing and one thing only. And you don't see cost up here. And it's about the customer or consumer experience. I'm probably one of the only supply chain people that's going to stand up here and not talk about cost. Because I think the cost thing has been overblown, and because of that, we're in this situation we're in now. And we've got to fix it. So what's our strategy been? What are we doing to try to help this? And I'm not saying we have all the answers, and I'm going to go through 3 or 4 things that we've been working on to try to help this, and some of the organizations we've partnered with, and I'm not saying that they're the perfect organizations, but they've worked for us. The first one is we've been working with is a company called ForKite, and I know a lot of you know who ForKite is and you've used ForKite. So think about our Purina animal nutrition business, and this is where we started with ForKite. They're all in rural areas because we're feeding farm animals. Okay. They're all generally very small carriers. 1, 2, 3 trucks is all they have. Right? The idea of us being able to track a shipment with those folks was very difficult. A lot of them didn't have technology, they didn't want the technology, whatever the case may have been. So we've been working with ForKites to be able to track every one of our Purina animal nutrition shipments. Something we could not have done without them. It was relatively new for them to sign up, I call these really small carriers. So they've learned and we've learned together. So we've partnered at this together. Okay. The next thing we're working on, of course, is how do we use weather and traffic to make it more reliable? Because unlike your shipment that comes to your house, where it's expected within a day, in most cases, businesses want it in hours. And so we've got to get a little bit more predictive. So we're actually working with some pilots with ForKites on how do we get weather. We're working with the Weather Channel. We're working with IBM on how we do that. But it's this whole partnership thing so we can help with the whole reliability and visibility. We plan to roll this out to our dairy group later and then eventually our crop protection group. Right? And you can talk to the partners that we're working with and they will tell you that we don't generally talk about price or cost. We talk about can we solve the problem. The cost and price will work itself out, I guarantee it. You got to solve the problem. Because if your customer's not happy, nothing else matters. Next thing we're doing, we're working with 2 companies, Uber and Convoy. Working on an AI-based brokerage system. So if you think about it, and no deference to any of the brokers that might be in this room because they all do a fine job, but one of the issues you have when you go to a broker is that, first of all, the broker makes calls to try to get you shipments, and you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know if they're going to find it. You don't know anything about the carrier you might get. Right? So if you think about what Uber has done for the taxi or the people moving, right? They're actually doing the same thing for trucking. So we have an app. We were their first or second user of the app, so we've been partnering with them from early on in this. You have an app that basically says where you going from and to, and it gives you all the options. We're using Convoy to do the same thing, so they're a little different. So we're trying 2 different ones. So we're piloting. We don't know if both will work, one will work, but we know we got to try something different because we need more capacity. And what they've basically done is bundled that capacity for you. Next thing we're working on. This is less about technology and more about partnership. So we're actively looking for organizations with private fleets that we might be able to partner with. And I say that because today, if you're a 3PL or you're any trucking company, you're probably utilized in that 90% range. I mean, that's what they are. They're all very capacity constrained. Private fleets are not. They're in the 50 to 60% range. And the reason is private fleets, because we have a small one for our Winfield business, they're designed for service. You want to make sure you deliver the product. That's why you have a private fleet. And so we're trying to find private fleets that are in the lanes we need that would be a backhaul for them that we could partner with them. And we have found 3 or 4. So we're working with Pepsi. We're working with a company called No Name Steaks up in Wisconsin. So areas where we need capacity, we're trying to find these private fleets. And then we'll figure out how to connect technology-wise and everything else. We got to find them first. So we're working on that. Autonomous vehicles. Right? Everybody knows what they are. They've heard of them. They're not everywhere yet. They're in very few places right now. But part of the issue, and this is the partnership thing, part of the issue is that there's lots of regulation on why they can't be used. And lots of states have lots of hang-ups. And so what we've done in the case we're working with 2 companies to say we're a Minnesota-based company. We do a lot of stuff with the state of Minnesota. So we're actually going to the state of Minnesota on these 2 companies' behalf and explaining why this is such a good idea. Now, we may not benefit from this for years down, but you got to start somewhere, right? We have to, once again, this is an industry problem. This is not a Land OLakes problem or anyone else. This is an industry problem. And we have to help each other in any way we can to make this work. So we've actually got the state of Minnesota to agree that when these two companies are ready, that they will provide the police escorts we need. They've already given us the roads that they'll let us try this on. And so we've got this done in the state of Minnesota, so we're looking at some of our neighboring states for the same thing. So we're going to go work with Iowa to try this. We're going to go work with Wisconsin. Now we probably know that we can't go to like Arizona and do this because we don't do a lot in Arizona. But what we're saying is shippers have to work in the regions that make sense for them. This upper Midwest makes sense for us, and that's why we're working there. So it's really about, once again, partnering and using the technology to get more capacity. And then the last thing we're doing is we're partnering with industry associations. So in our case, we're a grocery manufacturer, so it's GMA. So the GMA and the FMI, which is the Food Marketing Institute, are partnering together, and we're looking at things like, how much wait time is there for a truck? How long do they have to wait to get loaded, unloaded, sitting in the yard? We're looking at things like demand smoothing, right? Everybody wants their product today, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. If you're lucky, maybe the warehouse is open till 8 or 9. We're saying, what happens if we smooth that out? So we're running some pilots to say, what happens if you smooth that out? And the last thing we're doing is we're focusing really heavy again on this whole private fleet question. But we're doing it through our industry association. Once again, we understand this is not a problem we can solve by ourselves. So we're not trying to solve it by ourselves. We have to do this together. So just some closing thoughts from me. This supply chain challenge, this transportation challenge, there is huge disruption happening. Let's be realistic. Right? Whether it's the macroeconomics, whether it's the drivers, whether it's the consumers, your customers, everything. It's just massive disruption. That massive disruption means massive challenges for each and every one of us. And it's all driven, it's not driven by cost in reality. It's driven by the fact that your customer wants something different. And so you have to fix this for your customer. So my challenge to everyone in this room, so whether you're a technology provider, whether you're a consulting organization, whether you're a shipper, whether you're a manufacturer, whatever it is, my challenge to each and every one of you is find a way to partner with other folks to make this work. Because if not, this problem's not going away. And the only people that suffer are our consumers. And we believe, Land OLakes, believe we have to do this. Because we believe that if we don't do this, people won't get the food they need. And for us, that goes back to our mission, feeding human progress. Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions.
You know, I've had the thought, is this on? I've had the thought that, you know, with visibility tools like ForKites, I'm right here, that we could actually pay drivers for all the work they do. If we've got visibility where they are, if they're sitting somewhere and it's our fault because we're keeping them at the dock, we could pay them for that.
Absolutely. So to give you a perspective, so at Land OLakes, we haul a lot of milk, and we haul a lot of milk through a limited number of carriers, and we're actually doing that. So if a carrier's, there's a time limit, I call it. So if they're waiting for the first hour, that's on them, because we kind of say that's kind of normal. We pick the time. But if it's beyond that, we pay them for the entire time they wait. We talk to the company and say, we're willing to pay the company, and you pay your driver. So we agree with you 100%. That's our responsibility because we did that. Now that's an easy one for us because I call it an enclosed supply chain. It's from our farmers to our processing facility. The question you get into, and that's why we're doing this pilot with the GMA, is who's holding them up, like at a warehouse location? Was it us or was it someone else? So, but we do agree that that's the way to go. Yes.
Thank you for sharing the different strategies around partnership. Since Land OLakes has been implementing these strategies, have you seen a change in your results in on-time in full and/or on-shelf availability?
Yep. So I can't talk about on shelf only because that's the retailer end, but I can talk about two things: on time and in full, and our ability to get carriage. So if you think about the amount of shipments we make, and we make in the neighborhood of 1,000 shipments a week, give or take, that kind of number. Throughout all of last year, and so far this year, we've only had 3 shipments left on a dock. Only 3. So that should answer your question. We absolutely see these paying off. They're small. One's not going to solve the problem, so you got to do them all. And we probably need to do more, and so we're willing to partner with anybody who wants to help us do more. All right. Thank you.